Welcome to another episode of Halfway There. I'm very excited that you've decided to join us. This is episode number 25, and it's the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. I can't wait to share this one with you. In fact, one of the things that I think is very interesting is to share the experiences of people who are at different places on the spiritual spectrum, on the map. You know, anywhere from very early in their faith to more mature in their faith. Also, maybe I'm looking to add some more diversity of not just experience, but also of place. And so this episode I'm excited to share with you because it is with a gentleman who I met through Rob Karch. If you want to listen to Rob Karch's story, you can do that in episode number 20. Just go back a few from here. He connected me with Zac Medeiros. Now, Zac, he's an electrician in Quebec, grew up in a Christian family. He'll share all of those details. But what's fascinating is how he went through a process of really making his faith his own. And God, at one point he says, God shook me up, but he wasn't done breaking me. And so this is the story of how God really broke Zac and brought him to himself, and to give him really a passion for sharing the gospel and doing something really significant. Now, here's the thing. Podcasts were a lot of that journey. He is an electrician. He pops his earbuds in and goes, and he can take that wherever he is. And you know what? I love that, because it means that that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting. They can take this show, they can take somebody's testimony of God's work in their lives anywhere they want. It can reach anywhere in the world, and just with a simple little device. I think that's cool. So I'm excited about that. I was really stoked to hear Zac say that, and you'll hear our conversation. But I hope you enjoy it. Here is my conversation with Zac Medeiros. Hey, Zac.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for doing this. I'm really excited to just chat with you and hear a little bit about your story.
Yes, I'm very excited too. It's really nice for you to have me over.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're great. I've enjoyed just even our conversation here getting started. And I know that I've heard a little bit of your story, and I can't wait to just hear what God's done in your life. So why don't you start out? We always start out with kind of where your situation in life is right now, and then we'll go back and I'll ask you a few questions about your story.
Okay. So I'm 32 years old. I have a wife. I have 3 kids, and another one is coming. So I got my 4th one is coming over.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I'm an electrician in life. That's what I do during the week. I do electricity. And I go to a very cool church that one of your previous podcasters started. The church that Rob Karch started with my brother-in-law. So I go to that church. I'm very implicated there. I really have a heart for what we try to do amongst the Quebec people and where we are in Saint-Jérôme. And that's where I am right now.
Yeah, that's great. So that's a great point. So we met through Rob, which is cool. Yeah. And I will be sure to include the episode number. I don't have it handy. I could look it up, but so people can find that. But yeah. So he shared with us kind of his journey and his story there in Quebec. Now, are you from there? Obviously.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Quebec. And I stayed here. I'm in the suburb of Montreal. It's like 20 minutes from Montreal in the north section. So where I was always stayed here and raised here.
Yeah, cool. Well, so that's interesting. I think. Can you just describe it a little bit for us? What the climate is like there? not like the weather, but just kind of the spiritual climate or the environment. Because I think for a lot of us, a lot of my audience will be in America
Yeah.
and won't necessarily know what that's like. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. So I say here the spiritual, like the Catholic religion had a huge, uh, how can I say this, like empowerment on people like years ago. And the people were really trapped in the religion. They had like no way out, kind of. And the people kind of got sick of it, and they really threw like everything that has to do with God or religion. They really disconnected themselves from it, and they just live like normal life, but without God. And then the I don't have the number of like like Christian believers and stuff like that, since I'm just an electrician in life. But I know it's like below 1%, so I don't know what it is. So that's like the climate. People, it's like we're happy, like not happy, but I mean people are. I'm it's sorry, I'm looking for my word in English, but when we're gonna start talking, it will go out more easily. I hope so. But like people are like, they love other people. People love to talk. They like, we're like a party nation, I would say, kind of. People are happy to just live,
Yeah.
but always God outside of that kind of bubble of just no God, kind of.
Right. So it's not really a very spiritual climate at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also weird because people do call themselves Catholics, even though like my generation, I'm 32 years old, like my coworkers, they never stepped foot in a church apart from where they were baptized, because they baptize kids, baby, and even their kids, they have them baptized because they're like, yeah, but if they want to get married later on at church, then they can marry at church. But I always found that weird because they have no clue like about the story of Jesus or all that. So I'm like, why would your kid will want to marry in the church? You're not even married in the church. And so it's kind of, even if they put like God and Jesus out of their life, there's still some trace of like being in chain, some traces of it, of that is still there in the people.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So how did you grow up? I assume you grew up sort of in that similar Catholic kind of background?
Yeah, I'm kind of a weird specimen in Quebec. Both my father and my mother, I'm a third generation Christian in my family. My dad, he is born in the Azores, is the smallest island of Portugal, and he was born there. He immigrated here when he was really young, and is like my great grandmother converted to Christianity in Portugal then when she came. So my dad was raised Christian too. My mom is the same thing. It's really rare, those people from that time. So I was brought up in the church always. Uh, yeah, I grew up. So in that way, I kind of grew up like a normal American, I guess, even
Yeah.
with, or even in, or like the way we live it, like when I remember being frustrated because when I was young, I could not wear jeans going to church, and I was finding that dumb because I didn't understand and all that. So that's how I was brought up.
Yeah. Okay. So would you say you came to Christ through your parents, or how'd that happen?
Yeah, my sister told me I accepted Christ with her when I was like 6, but I don't really remember. If I remember, I was more like 9 or 10. I went in a Christian camp, which is something like sometimes I talk and people will say, "Oh, it's like here," but it's really special. Like I was going to Christian camp, which is really rare, and you need to find them, and so I was going there during summer, like 1 week for the summer, and I heard a testimony around a fire,
Mm.
and that really, I still remember like my heart being moved by seeing God move in the other people, and I was like, hey, I want to see that. Like I always had a fight with I'm kind of a rebel, I would say, and I always had difficulty with rules and all that. So for me, it's kind of a struggle all my life that I had. It's to struggle like between the love of God and the rules. So even at that young age, I was like, hey, God is more than rules. You know, he moves his people and he changed them. So that's when I gave my life to Christ. I was 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so what was that growing up then? What was your experience of God?
My experience with God as being young, I would say,
Like from that point.
yeah, from that point, I guess for a long time, I think, since I said I had difficulty with rules, I kind of had like, I was kind of always like a foot in and a foot out, kind of a lukewarm Christian since even when I was young. Like, I would really love God, but I would also really love the world. And like, I grew up, all my friends were non-Christian. So that was something weird too, because like sometimes I would do like bad choices and stuff, and then I would have like my parents, like, is it Proverb 1 who says like don't sit with the, I don't know the word in English, I know it in French, but don't sit with the jokers or something like that in
Yeah.
France. And I
Scoffers.
remember, yeah, and I remember my dad telling me that, and I didn't really understood. And throughout the podcast, when I might say some stuff that sounds like that, like maybe I'm gonna say stuff that is negative toward my parents and all that, but I'm really happy and I feel really blessed to have been brought up in that family. Even there is some stuff that, well, like everybody would do something different growing up, but I don't have a, it's not like a bitter situation. I have a really good situation with my parents and all that. But being young, I didn't understood really. Like, I was always a music lover. I always loved music. Like, I'm not really a talented musician. Even if I try, I'm more a listener. And like at younger age, my dad like didn't let me listen to some type of music because there was cuss word in it. And I didn't understood that because all my friends were doing it. And I was not approving his choice of music either. Like, there was no bad word, but I was starting to understand English because at that time I didn't understand English, so I just knew some stuff. And so it was always, I didn't really understood like all, for me, like Christianity was kind of a puzzle. And even at that young age, God had touched my heart and I had love for him for what he did on the cross. There was still some part of the puzzle I could not put my head around it, and I just didn't know how to like go through it, kind of.
Yeah, that's interesting. What was that piece of the puzzle?
Well, maybe we can do a jump to later,
Okay. What?
but like, because it took me time. It took me a lot of time to figure. Like, I figured out like 2 years ago. So, and then I'm 32. So I think from the age of 10 to 28,
Yeah.
I was always a really lukewarm Christian. Like, I really, like I said, I had two idols in my life. It was God and the love of the world and my pleasure and stuff like that. So I could not sip, like, my parents were really strict, and I mean, they were good Christian. Like, I remember, like, there's really not a lot of guys in Quebec that said they had a dad who was reading the Bible, and that's memory I have of being a kid. My dad in the Bible, he's a salesman, but he was working as an elder in the church, always implicated. I don't know if that's a word, but he was doing stuff at church, yeah. And so he was really strict, and I think even growing up, he kept himself from a lot of sin because he had the fear of the Lord. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle I kind of didn't really had. I know when I listen to some podcasts of, because I'm a big podcast listener, people in the States usually talk about the fear of the Lord and how it was something bad that the church used to manipulate them. For me, it was kind of the contrary. Like, I had no fear of God, and I just had like, I knew he loved me and he died for me, and then I can do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter because I was always portrayed as a good boy. Because if I compare myself to my non-Christian friends, I'm a good boy. So that thing too was weird for me because I had one Christian friend I'm still close to him today, but we were both kind of bringing ourselves down. We're not like bringing ourselves up. So I always thought I was a good Christian boy, but I was really not a good Christian boy. So that's part of the puzzle I had like to figure out. Like,
yeah, that's interesting because you describe yourself as a little bit of a rebel, right? As somebody who was kind of not.
I never thought so. That is something new to me. I thought no, well, now I know it's clear, but I never thought I was a rebel. I always saw myself as a good Christian boy, and as I'll go on, you'll see I did some dumb choices growing up. But even if I did some dumb choices, I was like, I'm still a good boy. And just not maybe 2 years. 2 years ago, I did Celebrate Recovery at my church. I know it's a ministry of. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, we have one at our church actually.
Okay.
So cool. It's a ministry for everybody who's listening. It's a ministry that is focused on addiction recovery, right?
Yeah.
For various kinds.
Yeah. And we were the first church who ever did that in Quebec. I was like the first kind of guinea pig group that did that. And so through that, I realized I'm a rebel. So now I say that, but growing up, I didn't talk like that because people love me and my parents. Everything was going all right, There was no really problem. And I would say growing up, I did some like at young age. I would say when I was 13, I was starting in high school and stuff, and I was just living like all my friends. I was doing everything my non-Christian friends were doing, so there was like no difference. I was smoking drugs, drinking. I had lots of girlfriends, which was bad because my parents didn't want it because they were not Christian and they wanted me to date a Christian girl later when I was older. But I had a hard head. I don't know if you can say that in English, but I was stubborn. Sorry, that's the word. So I was stubborn, and so I grew up like that, always fighting against my will, my desire, and what God's want for me, and all that. And I don't know if I like, even at that young age, something that changed my walk with God at the age, I think, it was around that age. I was maybe 14, 15. So I was kind of going more downhill toward my life with God. I was smoking more drugs and stuff like that, and kind of my love for God kind of diminished. And one summer, because before that, every summer I was going at the summer camp of the Christian camp it's 2 hours from my house. It's in Sherbrooke. It's Word of Life. They have a Christian school and they have a Bible. They have a Christian summer camp. So I was going there every summer, and that summer, I think I was 14, I didn't feel like going anymore, but my cousin who lives there is my best friend, but we see them rarely because he lives far. I just went to see him at the camp, and then there I decided to stay. And I told him I was using drugs and that, and he said to his father, because my parents didn't know that I was good for hiding stuff. And my uncle, who is working at that camp, he didn't know what I was. My cousin just told him, go talk to Zac. And that's a thing in my life you'll see throughout that. Like, my uncle decided to took some time and talk to me, and kind of, I know it's God who touches the heart, but sometimes you're like the messenger and stuff. So he had some wisdom to talk to me. He said, okay, well, I won't tell your parents, but when you go back, I'm gonna call you every month. I'm gonna call you every week to ask you if you have told your parents. And he kept his promises. And instead of staying there 1 week, I stayed all summer there because I didn't want to go back to my home after that, because it was really fun there. Like, the worship really was touching my heart, and I was reconnecting to God, to forgiveness and stuff in there. So at the end, when I came back, my uncle was calling, and then it was weird because he never called me. And then I remember when he was ringing, I would always pick up the phone to see if it was him who was calling. And eventually, I talked to my parents, and they helped me out through that. So that was like my high school year, and then so that was my middle high school. So I was like 14, and when I finished, and through that high school, it went pretty well, I would say. I kept like didn't use drug anymore. I was still dating non-Christian girl because in my church there was not really Christian girls. So that's another real. I know some place in the States is like that too.
Yeah.
But after I finished my high school, I wanted to go to Bible school because I really had questions about God, and I wanted to like be clear, like be how can I say this? I wanted to have doubts, the doubts to go away. So I went in Bible school.
So definitely, it sounds like you had a great mentor there. Was it your
and
uncle?
my uncle
Okay.
Jonathan. So that's a thing. Like that's why I went in that, just to show, because through my life I always wrestled with my relationship with God, since I had not really friends who could help me out toward God. I had good parents, but I was hiding a lot of stuff to them. So it's hard to have like someone to mentor you when you're lying and stuff. Right. And through that time, I know I really did some hurt to my parents because I was lying a lot through that period of time, and that really put ourselves closer together after that, after the forgiveness and stuff like that. So my uncle did a really nice job of mentoring me, and I was kind of like that, growing. At the age of 18, I met up Rob, another guy who stepped in as my mentor. It was another tough time of my life. I lost my girlfriend. I'm a car lover too, and at that time I got a loan for a car and it got stolen, and I didn't have insurance, so I lost my car, my girlfriend, and my job because I could not go to work anymore. And Rob just came out of nowhere, and he just wanted to talk to me, and he brought me with him and another pastor in the States when he was doing some, when you go to church to get some support and prayer group and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he brought me there. It was kind of weird because I was a mess, and he really took the time to love me and show me, like he was really pointing me to the Bible. So he was really kicking my butt to open my Bible and go seek answer in that. So that was when I was 18 years old, 18, 19. I met my wife around that time at the church, which is really a miracle because I was always dating non-Christian women, and I was waiting God to change them, but it never happened. And she was there already Christian. Yeah. So we married. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to at least point out that that is a real challenge, right? If you believe, and you want to marry a person who has your same value system and your same beliefs in the Lord, if that community is really small, it's a lot harder. And it's not, I mean, we could make light of it, but it is an issue, right? It is something that matters.
It is.
I think that's interesting. The way that obviously that would be a thing that especially a young man would be worried about, right?
Yeah, it is, and especially I remember, like, I was not lying. That was always my thing in my heart. I was always, but I was telling my parents, God is powerful. He can touch their heart too. I didn't really understand, but anyway, so I really remember that being a big struggle.
Sure. And well, okay, so just to kind of put that in the realm of like your spiritual growth, that's a trust issue, right? And that makes it sound bad. I don't mean it that way at all, but that's a thing that you would have to trust God for, which is interesting. Kind of in that time for you, that was a formational piece of trust that you had to Trust God. So when He provided somebody, what was the impact of that on you?
You mean the impact when I found my Christian wife?
Yeah. I mean,
I also just want, yeah, I also just want to step out like just couple of months, not months, but in that through finding my wife, like I was having a relationship before with a girl, and my parents were not approving of her relationship. She was Christian, and I was finding it hard because I'm like, she's Christian, she was living in sin, and so do I, and we were living in sin together, and we're not living together, but we had a relationship of sin. And one day I got the guts to go tell my dad that I was having a relationship, I was sleeping with my girlfriend, and that really brought tears to his eyes, because it was like, even if I had relationship with girl before, I always kept that pure, because I don't know why, but well, I know why. My parents were so like, they put so much value onto that to stay clean before the marriage. So even if I was dating non-Christian woman that didn't understand that, I always hold my ground. And so then when I finally told my dad, it really like, he didn't understand. He was like, we told you, like they had explained to me, but like you said, I had a trust issue with God, that like his rules are good for me, and the way he designed the world is good. But I always have a trust issue with God that it's right. So my dad pointed out to me, he said something I will always remember. He told me, "Do you really want to marry that girl?" And I said, "No, I don't want." No, sorry, he didn't say that. He said, "Do you want her to be the mom of your kid in the future?" And I was 18. I didn't want to have a kid at 18, but when he told me that, I kind of kept thinking, and I was like, ah. And he said, "If you don't want to have a kid with that woman, like, you get to think ahead." I was just thinking for the moment right now. So at that point, I broke up the relationship. I stayed single for a couple of months. Then I found my wife at the church, and I dated with her 2 weeks. She never had a boyfriend before. I don't know what she found in me, because I was kind of a mess in that time too. And I was always, even if I'm Christian, and it's there's not a lot of Christian, and Christian are like, they dress well, and when they sin, it's kind of hidden. When I was younger, I was hiding my sin, and it did hurt to my parents. So growing up, I said, when I sin, I'll be transparent, so like I won't hurt people no more. So I don't know what my wife found, but we dated 2 weeks, and honestly, like, I was coming from a sin relationship, and I didn't want to repeat it with my wife. So after 2 weeks, I decided to broke the relationship, and that was really bad for her, because she was sure we're gonna marry. And then I just said, I told her, I don't want you to wait for me, because I was thinking she was too good for me. So like I broke the relationship, and I went back to my home, and I said to God, I gotta work things with you to make it my relationship. So eventually, I was finding myself not worthy of her. So that's how we started, or stopped the relationship.
Started and stopped, maybe.
Yeah, and I was still seeing Rob during that time, and I'm happy he was a patient man, because I had some ups and downs, and he was always there to. Because sometimes when you mentor someone, you can be disappointed when they fail, but I think he showed me like God's grace and love that is always there, no matter how bad you do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important point. I've heard that before. That how valuable it is when people show you grace and forgiveness, even if you, whatever sin, mess up, whatever you want to call it. If people accept you, it's a really great demonstration of God's acceptance and love for you, even anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. That's what I hear in you.
Yeah. And there was and at that time there was a small group at Rob's house too, like a prayer meeting. I don't know if you call it like that.
Yeah.
and I was going there too, and I really like it. It was I was the younger guy. I was like 18, 19. It was older people like mid 20s, and but that really helped me grow too, just to see man and woman open the Bible together. And my parents was not going there, so that was kind of me alone,
Hmm.
like taking care of my own faith at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So would you say that it was becoming your own?
yeah, because yeah, it was becoming my own. It was not anymore the. I mean, my parents were great, but since it was strict and all that, you kind of feel the pressure to always, like make them happy and stuff. I was not faking it, but I don't know, for me, I remember when I was going there, I was like, hey, I really want to, I want to learn more about God. I want to go meet him. So I was going there. It was really not my parents. I was alone going there. So
So what happened next?
then we got married, we worked, we got kids. Just I was involved at the church in Saint Jerome, but even I was doing worship at the church, which is weird because I'm not really a musician. But when it's a small church, there's not a lot of musician. If there's not a lot of lady, like I said before, so I learned playing the guitar with my brother-in-law, and we did worship for a couple of years. But I started drinking a lot, and like at that point, so when I would say from like 24 to maybe 22, from 22 to 28, I was doing worship at the church. I was implicated there, but I had drinking problems too. And I remember like, because that's another story, but for me, worship is weird because we don't have like worship like in the States. It was more like hymns and stuff before, and it was starting to come in our church, but I was not musically capable of doing like nice rock like I see in church in the States.
Yeah.
And I was
So,
always,
sorry, can you just tell us what time period that was? Because I think that'll help.
yeah, so now I'm 32.
Okay.
So that was from when I was 22 to 28.
So like early 2000s.
Yeah. So doing the worship thing, I was finding myself weird in that situation. I was feeling kind of an hypocrite
Hmm.
because one, my relationship with God was really a disaster. I was still really imbricked. I was like trapped in my pleasure seeking still. Like I really gave up kind of finding my hope and joy even in my family and stuff. I had cars. I was crazy about that. It was all my life was building my car, and I was working, making money to build my car and buy some beer. And like people at church knew, but I don't know if they knew that much.
Mm.
But I was finding it hard because I was often hangover on the Sunday morning, and that really brought me like pain in my faith, kind of. It's kind of, I was only realizing it on stage that I was not worthy to be there, and I was a joke, kind of. So that was hard for a couple of years. I started being shook up in my faith when I was around 27, 28. My brother-in-law did a sermon, a series, and it was that really touched me. And he did a sermon about our life being like a ladder. So like we stack up like I don't know how to say this. A ladder, there's just some step.
Yeah.
And so every step, you have some stuff that you stack up there. So me being as a Christian, I thought I had like good step, like getting a wife. I had that. Getting kids, I had kids. I have a house. I have a good job as an electrician. And I realized that God was not really part of my American dream. I was just stacking up those things, and He showed me that the ladder points to God, and like, so my priorities, and it sounds dumb when I explain it, but when I was in the church, I never kind of realized that everything I was doing was bad.
Well,
So that,
so
sorry.
no, I just want to affirm that because I don't think it sounds dumb at all. I think what I'm hearing is you were realizing that your life was built on a different foundation than the Lord,
Yeah.
right? And there was something there in you that you obviously thought you knew that, whether you could have articulated it at that time or not. It sounds to me like you knew that you certainly didn't feel connected to God, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you probably felt, I can't tell, you tell me, um, but some maybe a guilt or shame about that, where you were kind of like, okay, maybe at least your Christian walk and maybe your life had kind of gone, it looks nice, but it was kind of off the rails a
Mhm.
little bit.
Yeah.
Would you put it that way? I don't know.
Yeah, you really said it better. Sometimes I lack some word in English, but your
Well,
guilt and shame was really a good. It was really a good thing. I was looking for that word.
okay. Well, your French is way better than mine, so we'll just trade off.
Yeah, cool.
But that's how did that resolve itself? You were
Yeah,
living with this kind of sense of being a hypocrite. What
yeah.
happened?
So at that point on, God had shook me up, but He was not done. He was not done breaking me, and eventually all that destroying pattern kind of brought me. I fell into a depression. That was in yeah, I was 20, 27, 28 when I did my deep depression, and it was kind of weird because I didn't believe in depression. I'm not a real macho guy, but I work in construction, and it's often something that people use. I always thought people that didn't want to work kind of call out the depression stuff, so I never even understood it. And one time I remember I was talking with my cousin, the one in the beginning of the podcast at the summer camp. I
Yep.
was talking to him on the phone because we don't see ourselves a lot. But he was just, how it's going, and we have we have a really close relationship, even if we don't see ourselves. I really love him, and we're really transparent. Like we talk about our struggles, like drinking, pornography, stuff like that. We're really transparent, and I was like, yeah, I have a real, even if I don't do well in drinking, I was like, I have a victory with porn. I don't do it anymore. And he's like, great, great. And he said, oh, so did it like help with your relationship with your wife? And I'm like, no, not really. And it's funny. I say this. I don't know all the words in English, but like I didn't really realize, but I had no desire for my wife either. And then I was 28, and my cousin said, that's not normal. Like you cannot stop like that. And then he just made me realize, and I said, yeah, and I cry all the time. And then he just told me, you're really, like, you're having a depression, you're really depressed. So it's kind of weird because I didn't know how it was working, and I was talking to nobody about it because I was kind of ashamed of crying all the time, and that I had no more sex drive and stuff. I'm 28, and it's kind of weird. And even during that time, my wife thought like maybe I was not loving her or something like that because I was not pursuing her, but I was really just broken, really depressed. And I started seeing a shrink, you call it like that?
Yeah, you can call it
A
that.
man, a guy, you pay him and he listens to you talking.
Right.
I don't know how you say it, but I started, and I really wanted to see a Christian one, so I called the Christian Association, and they were like two of them, a Christian, and I called him, and he was not even a Christian no more.
Oh man.
So that was I was really bummed about that. So he really knew everything, and he was blaming like the church because I was working a lot at the church, so he made me quit doing the worship, which was really a good thing. And he really concentrate on yourself, on your inner pleasure and stuff like that. But even if that was not really a God centered help, like I let go of the worship, and with my wife talking, she let me, because I was having kid. She was pregnant of my second child, which is a boy. And before that, I was always working in my garage on my car. So I was working during the day. I would come home, eat, and then work on my cars with my friends. And that was my life. So then she let me do this more, so I would not feel guilty, so I would be better. And eventually it got worse. I was not getting better. I was getting better emotionally, but with God, I became really angry at God when I realized that I was, and I had to say to people I was having a depression. I was really, really angry, like I never had before. Like I didn't understand like why I had to, because I was really, he really broke me like heavily. I had like no will to live anymore, and that was, I cannot understand that. I'm Christian. I had like a big opportunity to be raised Christian here in a place that there's no Christian, and I just don't want to live anymore. I was really in the dark. I didn't understand. I didn't understand what he was doing with me. I feel like he was playing or something, and uh, it's it's not weird, but like one thing that, like the only thing that I had to kind of hold on to in this life is my girl was 1 year and a half, and like anytime I would come from work, and like she was always there, like always happy to see me, and that thing kind of, I don't know why, but that thing really, uh, I really like hold on to that thing. Like, okay, that if drinking doesn't give me pleasure, if car doesn't give me pleasure, if sex doesn't give me pleasure, then I'll, during the day, I'll wait for that moment when I can go back home and just be with her. So from that point, after that, I don't know why, I got an iPhone. You'll see where I'm going with this. And I never had internet on my phone. So now I had data plans, and I started listening to some podcasts. I don't know who pointed that towards me, but somebody told me, oh, you should listen to some podcasts. And I started listening to Francis Chan podcast. And at that time, I was not reading my Bible anymore and not praying, because like God had left the building. I don't know how to say that, but
yeah, that's good. We usually say that about Elvis, but that's good for God too.
yeah, maybe that's where I took it. But yeah, like for me, I really like, I was going to church because I wanted my wife to like not be worried about me, because I had depression. Now what? I stopped going to church, so
Yeah.
I was like, all right, it's good for my wife. So I was not doing worship anymore. I was doing the sound, the audio behind the scene. And yeah, so I started to listen to Francis Chan, and he was preaching the Bible like different than what I heard in Quebec before. And he made me read my Bible, because I could not believe what he said was true. So I would come back from work and I was reading my Bible. So it started like, it really like opened up a love for the scripture, listening to him. And I work 8 hours a day as an electrician, and I'm alone. I have my earbuds, so I was listening to 8 sermons of Francis Chan a day, and then I would come home, I would open my Bible and just check, oh, he's right, oh, I never saw it like that. And from that really started to really, really touch my heart. So from that point, I decided, I took 1 month of no drinking for a month. And then after that, like my cars felt vain. So I sold them after a little while. I had a couple, so I sold them. And yeah, so reading the scriptures, like, as I said, the only thing that I was happy for was my little girl. Then after that, I was really happy. I couldn't wait to go home and just read my Bible, which is weird because I never was like that before. So during that all year, so that's I was 30. I was around 30, so that's like 2 years ago. I really did a lot of reading.
It sounds like you discovered certainly podcasts, which I'm thrilled to hear, as a matter of fact, right? Because I think these kinds of venues can certainly be a blessing to people. It sounds like it has been to you. It sounds like you also, just having somebody open up the word to you in a different way, uh, showed you a little bit more of who God was and who what God's intentions toward you were, that maybe you had maybe lost sight of, or maybe hadn't seen for a while.
Yeah, he really made me fall in love with another God. It's like I discovered something different that was not there before, and I really felt like I fell in love. I was amazed. I was in. I was. There's a word he says. I was in awe, like towards God, you know? And I didn't really had it like that before. So I was able to really put my trust in him. Like, okay, like you tell me that, I'll shut up and I'll just do it. And from that point on, it completely changed like my not my goal, but like my desire, how like my idol, which is myself. I was really selfish before, and I was really obsessed with pleasure. It's weird, but that was always I was living just to to have pleasure, and that was my main goal in life, was just enjoy it and be. I wanted to be a good dad also, but like my goal was just pleasure, and from that point is just now I want to serve God and do what's right and for Him.
Yeah. Well, how does that work itself out for you? So what so it sounds like your life really changed a couple years ago. What is that?
Yeah.
So give me some practical examples or stories of how that.
After that, another mentor came in. Like around that time, Rob had left to Colorado, and now another mentor came in my life is Marius. He's a South African dude, and he's the one who started the Celebrate Recovery at my church. So and it's funny because all those men are really different, man, and I kind of see them as having different attributes of God, and really different. And I really find it interesting when you have someone close to that God who loves Him, and you see different. Like I see God through some people, and it's like different facade. Can I say this? Something like different side of God, kind of. And so he was really more. How can I say this? He helped me more being really strict with my life and like obey God, and he helped uh, develop a good fear of God. And also, at the same time as listening to Francis Chan's sermon, I was listening to another podcast. Some people don't love it, but I like it. It's called Bad Christian Podcast.
Oh, I've heard of that.
You heard that? I know some people don't like it because they have coarse language mixed in that, but for me, like that mixed with Francis Chan speaking really helped me like dig deeper for myself and not take what, because when you go to church they teach you stuff, and you have to open the Bible and search the truth in it, and it's something I hadn't really done. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people do in Quebec, so it's easy to just be like, just have one way of thinking towards God. And that really helped me to open my mind and to seek for the truth in the scriptures. So from that point on, it's weird, but like all the stuff I was idolizing started to crumble. Like as I said, it started with my cars, but even it's been a while now. But even I have a hard time just working, because sometimes I feel I'm doing nothing. I feel like I'm losing my time. I'm bringing money home, but I have nobody to talk to about God and stuff. So even that has changed, like how I do life. So now I have a small group at my church. I have a small group at my home. So I have a couple of friends. We reunite during the week, and I enjoy that. But even that, in my heart, I always want to share the gospel. But in my small group, we're all Christians. So it's something in my mind now that I'm searching for my place. Like, where can I put? Like, where do I fit in now? Because my work is boring and I find it vain. But I still don't know. And my my brother-in-law, which is my pastor at my church, he took some other men in the church and he did some formation to do some we call it pastoral like classes. So I did a small class for that. I did one speaking at the church, like a sermon on Sunday morning. I did that one time just to, just searching for how can I. That's what I have a hard time to do. Like you see where I'm going. When I was younger, I didn't understand the faith of my parents because they were really faithful to God. But for me, it did not make sense to be like a nice Christian, like you don't swear, you don't drink and all that. Like it did not make sense for me. I didn't understood it. And I realized that now older, that even what I say to people that are close to me and that they see me did some decision in my life that I changed. I said like the only reason that I decided to be clean is for the gospel. And I didn't understood that before because I didn't really, like I'm not like shooting darts at my parents, but they were doing a lot of stuff, but I was not seeing it like the disciple, you just go out and you just spread the gospel. Like I was not seeing that and I didn't understood, but like why do you put so much effort into being pure if you're not like proclaiming the gospel? Like so now that I just figured out now that I think that's why I was kind of always a foot in and a foot out of the church, because I didn't really saw like the fire in people's that was in the church toward proclaiming the gospel. Do you know what I mean, kind of?
Yeah, I do. I think so. And it's interesting. I had kind of a similar experience as a young man. And we had a good church, but one of the things I was always interested in, and one of the reasons I was drawn towards spiritual formation, was because I always wondered. We do the same things year after year after year, and are we really reaching our community? And are we really changing? Are we, is God? Are we becoming more like Christ? And, a lot of times my answer to that was no. And that was both for me and for the people around me. We had the same arguments, the same conversations over and over. And I realized that it takes time now, and that's okay. But it was a real question for me. And so I hear in you sort of a similar question, like, okay, it's one thing to live this way, but maybe there's some ways that we need to be a little more radical to reach the millions of people around us who need Christ.
Exactly. I would say a big amen to that. And I'm really passionate about that. That's the thing. I try to figure out how can I be more efficient of spreading the gospel. So that's the thing I'm really passionate about. And like even I have a nice house, in a good neighborhood, security for my kid, all that kind of. We were struggling, me and my wife, because she likes it here. I was like, why don't we just? I'm kind of crazy a little bit. I don't really plan stuff. I'm kind of I like stuff fast, I like when it. So I was like, okay, let's just sell everything and like move in a smaller house and stuff like that. I'm gonna quit my job and stuff. And then she was like, we need to think ahead. And so now it's funny because we have place, and now since it's been 1 year, I have two missionaries living in my downstairs in my house, and they are learning French at our church. And they are leaving right after Christmas. They're gonna go to Chad. They are two women. They are women that like a nurse, but a baby comes out more natural. How do you call that in English?
Like a doula?
In French is a sage-femme. So they are that. So they're gonna go welcome babies in Chad with the nomads, which is really an awesome project that they're not project, but they're really a crazy mission field they're going into. And I'm really like, that is really a blessing to like it helped me and my family challenge us to be more missionary. And yeah.
Cool.
So even if my house, like I was struggling with it, like God found a way to use it for now.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So let me just affirm you in this, because your struggle is something that I feel very acutely, and I can relate to. Because I told you earlier that I work for a Fortune 500 financial company,
Yeah.
and it's not what I love at all either. And all the words you use to describe your work, boring and kind of, not really feeling like I'm making an impact for the gospel. I would absolutely say that's exactly how I feel. I would sign on to that 100%. Um, so I hear you there. I have found that uh, just being faithful in it actually is a really big witness for people, and having a good attitude. And it's the times when I don't have a good attitude that I'm ashamed, um, and I have to wrestle with that kind of all the time. But anyway, I can relate to that. I hear you, and I don't know what God's doing in you, but I'll tell you what, your story, even just sharing that you have really been changed by God, and are in love with Him, is super powerful. And so I don't know if you can share it. It doesn't sound like you've coworkers or whatever, but whoever you can share it with, you know, you're
Mm.
God's going to use it, and He
Mm.
does that. He does that. This is the way that the church spreads like fire. When one life
Yeah.
changes, then others change as well.
And like you said, I did one sermon at the church. Can I say it like that? Like I did, and some there is some guy at work. They're not electrician. They're like the general. The one who gives us work. They take care of all the chantier, all the work, like the plumbers. They take care of everybody. And I see them like maybe I used to see them a lot. Now I don't see them often. And last week I saw them, and one guy was like, "Hey, a guy in your company like it was kind of laughing, showing me you on video on the like at your church. Are you becoming a pastor?" I'm like, "No, no, not yet." But and then he wanted to see it, and I sent it to him, and then his brother texted me that I know him too. He's an older man, and he said, "Hey, I want it." So it's kind of stupid, but I was really happy. Like I don't know what, but I prayed like all week. Just I don't know. It's just something I would not have thought about. Like if I said, "Oh, I want to witness to those guys," oh, I'll go talk. I'll study the Bible for like a month and then do a speech just for them so I can send them with my phone because I'm on YouTube. I would never have thought that way, but God did it, and I hope that I can see some fruit in the future, and
Yeah.
I'm praying for them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know Rob shared with me a little bit that it takes some time, to build those relationships and to be able to speak into people,
Mhm.
and share the gospel, because it's just such a, I guess we would say, unchurched, but it's very, from what it sounds like to me, very just a secular culture. Just God doesn't really
Yeah,
factor in at all, and so it takes a while to kind of break through that.
yeah, and I guess it's like that in the States also. Maybe I don't know, but
Yeah.
in here, if you're Christian, you're kind of stupid because you believe in God. Because in here, people don't really believe in God; they believe in evolution and whatnot. And even if they, not just that, they really see it as being weak
Yeah.
and being a sheep. That's the word I was looking for. Like yeah, because like the cult, there was some cult a couple of years ago, and it kind of exploded. Some popular cult, and they did some really bad stuff. And so often people think we're like a cult.
Mm.
So that's a plague. Can I say this? It's like something that plagues
Yeah.
us Christian. We always have to say no, we're not a cult, and then but it's been a couple of years, and I really feel like God is doing something in Quebec. I think it's like I know there's tons of people praying for us outside, like because we talk about Quebec, but we're in Canada, and there's a lot of people in other province that are praying. They're sending money, they're sending workers, and I see like there's a church, and like our church, we're kind of small. We're 200 at max people in a big city, so it's small. But I know in Sherbrooke, they have a church, Acts 21, and it's really good to see God work there. Like they're bringing people it's unchurched people that goes to the church.
Wow.
Because that's a problem in Quebec too. When you make a new church, it's church people that go to your church and they quit the other church because yours is better. So,
No.
but God is working. He is starting to
Yeah.
show it.
I think one of the
Sorry, go.
Well, I was gonna say I think one of the big differences is here. We have churches on every corner, and we have really huge churches, and so there are opportunities for people to hear the gospel, and many people have heard some kinds of things, but it's increasingly getting more secular for sure, and there is a little bit of I want to say rough treatment at the hands of like the media and some of what I would call more liberal people, but nothing compares to that, to being thought of as a cult. Like that's very much the way the early church would have felt, where they would have had a similar portion of the population or less even be believers. Anyway, interesting. Were you going to say something?
Nope.
Okay, you're good. Anything else you want to share? Like I don't know, you've been very open, and I appreciate you doing that. Anything else you want to share there?
Well, if some of you people are curious and would like to come to Quebec sometimes, we have some nice place they can come to do. Well, Nano, Colorado, I've seen pictures Rob showed me, and it's really nice too. So I think you guys have nothing to envy about Quebec. But if you want to do some vacation, they can always give us an email. They can come to our church and maybe just pray for, if there's one thing I can say, if your listener can have a place because it's not really exotic as a mission place, Quebec, it's like in the US, but in French.
Yeah.
And we love the Canadians, the hockey team. But if your people could like really pray for us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it's just kind of amazing to think that there's such a large mission field just north. I mean, it's not that far.
Yeah.
That it's not even. You don't have to go that far out of sight of your comfort zone to find people who need Jesus. And so you don't have to go to Africa. You don't have to go to Asia. Great if you're called there, but maybe God will call some people at least to pray and maybe to go to Quebec.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. I definitely appreciate the time.
Yes, me too.
Zac, thank you so much for sharing that with us. You were so transparent about your story, certainly the struggles that you went through. I don't think you're alone either, brother. There's a lot of us that have gone through things, whether it's struggling with sin, with the structures of the church as we grew up. A lot of those things. I think your story definitely resonates with me, and I think it will with a lot of our listeners. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope Zac's story was really meaningful to you. If it was, would you reach out and let us know? I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach out at the website, leave a comment at ericnevins.com. You can find Zac's page there, or you can go to Facebook, facebook.com/halfwaytherepodcast. Guys, I hope this show has been meaningful to you. Until next time, keep the faith.